Welcome to Leading Your Culture, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Bill Nye. While serving in the United States Air Force, I was selected to attend the U.S. Air Force Leadership School, which is still the foundation for many of my leadership beliefs. That experience set me on a course for a successful career in business, consulting, mentoring, training, and speaking. In this series, my guests will come from many disciplines to discuss the most serious and at times not so serious topics on leadership and culture. Hello, everyone. So over the last couple of weeks, I've recorded a couple of episodes, the first of which I talked about having a culture of control. And then the second, I talked about the importance of being deliberate when it comes to growing your culture. And when I talked about the culture of control, I made a promise that I would record an episode where I talked about the culture of freedom. You know, when I talked about the culture of control, I said, this is not about micromanaging. A culture of control is a culture that really depends on policies, procedures, that sort of thing. And you hold your team accountable, to those expectations, to those policies, to following those procedures. And there are a lot of really good companies out there that operate as a culture of control. But the other type of culture that I want to talk about is culture of freedom. Now, I will say that a culture of freedom sounds good on the surface, and it can be. It can be amazing. It can actually be a beautiful thing, quite frankly. But it's risky. And it's risky because you're giving your team the freedom to do what they think is best. Now, this culture, in order to grow and be really productive and really, just get the results you want, depends on a couple of really critical things. Three things, in fact. Number one, you have to have a team of people who are self-disciplined. Obviously, if you're going to give people the control to sort of, govern themselves, if you will, they have to be self-disciplined. They have to, have the discipline to do what they know is right, even when they don't feel like doing it. That self-discipline is really important. My time in the United States military, that was something that was really emphasized every single day, was the importance of being self-disciplined. You're supposed to do something, you get up and you do it. And so having a team of people that's self-disciplined is really important. Now, that can be hard to find, and that becomes a really important thing to emphasize during the interview process, to make sure that this is indeed someone who has that level of self-discipline. They're going to be where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, doing what they're supposed to be doing. The second thing is it requires a team of that it has really strong, high, obvious values, work ethic, honesty, integrity, good communication skills, respect for others, culture of control. If you have people who lack the values, to operate within, a team dynamic, and yet, kind of in it for themselves, doing their own thing, don't have the work ethic, they're lazy, whatever the case might be, then a culture of control becomes chaos. It becomes complete and total chaos. And so you have to have people who are self-disciplined, and you have to have people that have a really good, strong value base, personal values. The third thing is you've got to be crystal clear. You have to be crystal clear about your standards, your expectations, if you will. You see, in a culture of control, everything's about the policies. It's about the rules. Follow the policy, follow the process, the procedure, stay within the lines. But the culture of freedom is not like that. And so you have to be very clear. You have to be a good communicator from the top down as to what your expectations are, and if you're not clear about those expectations, then your team is looking around and saying, well, not quite sure what it is that they want from us. And there are a lot of organizations out there, they say, yeah, we're a culture of freedom. We want to be a culture of freedom. But then they're terrible communicators. And that is a really, really bad thing. You can't be a bad communicator and have a really successful organization operating as a culture of freedom. And so you've got to have that strong communication about standards and expectations. And so the standards replace the rules. Now, think about, and I talk about this all the time with the culture, you think about a culture as something that grows. And when you have a piece of dirt out in the yard and you don't plant anything in that piece of dirt, in that space, something's still going to grow. And so you've got to make sure that you're growing the right thing. So if you replace the rules, or if you take out the rules, and you just leave that space barren, then bad things are going to grow there. Those are the things you've heard me call those the weeds. And so if you take out a rule, you've got to replace that rule with a standard. And so you got to be really crystal clear about what your standards are, your standards for profitability, your standards for, the customer experience, your standards for attendance, your standards for how you measure success, and these things aren't rules, but they're standards for excellence. And so you got to be really clear about establishing those standards, communicating those standards so that the team understands exactly what it is you expect of them. Now, a culture of freedom can be very problematic if you have an inexperienced team. If you've got a lot of folks who have not, been in the workforce for very long, first job after high school or after college, they're young and they're inexperienced, this is probably the wrong approach. You can't just give people who don't know, or don't have a lot of experience the freedom to do as they, what they think is best, because they don't have the experience to truly know what is best. And so, it works really well with a high performing, experienced team. And I will say this, if you have a high performing, experienced team and you want to operate as a culture of control, as opposed to a culture of freedom, they can find that to be stifling, limiting, really not an enjoyable working experience. But at the same time, you have inexperienced people and you just throw them out there and say, okay, everybody, go out there and win, go out there and be successful. And they don't have a game plan. They don't have the experience to know what to do. That becomes equally frustrating. And so what I found is, a lot of times employers have a turnover problem because, they're operating, they're growing a culture of control with a highly experienced team, or they're trying to grow a culture of freedom with an inexperienced team. Or the biggest mistake I see a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations make is trying to jump back and forth from one to the other. We're a culture of freedom when things are going well, but the minute there's a problem, the market changes. All of a sudden, you just clamp down on them, and all of a sudden, all these new expectations, and I'm in charge, and that's a huge mistake. I see it happen all the time. Listen, in every organization, the best companies have employees who make mistakes. They have employees with great intentions and they care and they're trying to do their best, but they make a mistake. And so, it's important to understand that when mistakes are made, you don't suddenly just pull out your culture. You don't go out into the garden and just, because you've got 10 tomato plants and one, isn't producing tomatoes, you don't go out there and pull all the tomato plants out of the ground, but I see people do that all the time. And so, be intentional about what it is that you're trying to do, who you're trying to be, be very clear about it, and then be very clear of well, what's the right culture for us to grow? Because you can't put a corn seed in the ground and expect to get, green beans, and you can't put a green bean seed in the ground and expect to get, tomatoes. You got to be very clear about what it is you're trying to grow, whether it's a culture of freedom or a culture of control. It's up to you to decide as a leader. But once you decide, make sure that you still have the guardrails in place that allows that culture to grow, to profitably and in a healthy way. I hope this is helpful. As always, thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Bill Nye. If you want to know more, you can certainly check out my website, bill@BillNyeApartment, or that's my email address, sorry. You can check out my website at BillNyeApartmentGuy.com, or you can always email me, bill@BillNyeApartmentGuy.com. Thanks for checking me out. Talk to you soon.
Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope today's conversation left you with a fresh perspective on leadership and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Want to hear from other industry speakers whose goal is to bring along the next generation of leaders? Then log on to multifamilymedianetwork.com, where you'll meet some of the most innovative voices in the industry.